I want to tell you a story. I am a neuropsychologist, and my beat, as I like to call it, is the connection between your brain, your pain, and your relationship. In this story, I do some executive coaching, and I was working with a senior consultant. And when we came to work together, this guy was tremendously successful in a lot of classically successful ways. He definitely had a workhorse ethic. He had a real take charge, take no prisoners, come hell or high water attitude. And the reason that he came to work with me is that there was a lot of tension on his team. So to put it really simply, he had star performers on his team, and those star performers were absolutely held in the warm light of his adulation. And everybody else who was tier 2 was shut out in an Arctic blast. Okay, this was by his own admission. This had worked for a long time in the organization, but things had hit a boiling point and we came to work together. So I'm always most interested in people's own explanations for the patterns before them. So I said, what's going on? Like, why is this happening? And his first pass explanation was that he loved success, right? He loved success. He loved being successful. He loved being around other people who reminded him of his success. He liked being around people who themselves were successful. Okay, I can certainly follow the logic, but that's not really an interesting story, and it's certainly not a helpful one. Like, it doesn't help us solve the pain points here. And frankly, like, it's a pretty common story. I mean, do you even know anyone who's like, I've given this a lot of thought and success just is not for me. I'm just not into it, right? The brain is absolutely wired. The system is rigged for all of us to want success, okay? So what's much more interesting to me is the other side of that coin. So what is it about the absence of success that is intolerable for him to hold, right? And more importantly, I'm much less interested in the stories about all the characters around us, right? When people are first asked about problems, there's a very natural impulse to start describing all the ways the people around us are causing us pain. But when I do work, am most interested in what I call the unspoken script. So the unspoken script is something we all have. It is an internal narrative, and it's an old patterning that tells us how the world should unfold, and most importantly, how we should behave. And so this guy's unspoken script was that success at any cost. And this is a pretty self-punishing and tyrannical script, right? Because success at any cost means you start to get in some pretty catastrophic black and white thinking. So if I don't do an A+, bang up, knock it out of the park job, it's an utter calamity, okay? So even that though, right? That's not that novel. When it comes to that particular script, a lot of us are playing that horror movie in our mind. Here's the piece that I think is really kind of important and interesting now, is that we are having unprecedented conversations about growth, about transformation, about evolution, and nearly all of these conversations are unfolding in the domain of emotional intelligence, right? People are talking about how to become emotionally resilient, how to become emotionally agile, how to listen like they have never listened before, how to include people that have been excluded, how to empathize with people, especially people with whom maybe you do not share those problems. So, what I want to suggest to you is that the fundamental thing that matters in any of those things I mentioned, and quite most likely anything that you can imagine in the domain of emotional intelligence, the thing that matters the most is how I hold my own pain inside of my own body. So let's go back to this guy. He will never be able to tolerate in others what he already sees as hideously ugly inside of himself. Others are a reflection of the things we are drawn to and the things that we cannot tolerate and we cannot hold. And so what this means, if we're thinking about a new wave, a new dawn of leadership, is we can approach it in more inefficient ways. We can just talk about empathy. We can talk about how to be a better listener. We can talk about these kind of, authenticity or these general leadership building skills. We can talk about team building. But there is always lever 0. And lever 0 is in the belly of the beast. And in the belly of the beast is how I, as a leader, come to know my own pain. How to work with it, how to manage it, how to behave with it. And so what I call this idea of those who can really manage their own pain is an emotional authority, okay? And an emotional authority can lead their people through painful times, through scary times, through uncertain times, because they know not just what to do with their pain, but what to do with their own pain. And so if this is something that you think would be useful or interesting to you, I invite you into these conversations. I'm going to be talking across the month of May about this idea of becoming an emotional authority. And I hope to give you greater insight into how you can become an emotional authority by thinking better about the connection between your brain, pain, and your relationships.